Okay, a very warm welcome to our Miracle Monday call. My name is Reverend Lisa Windsor, and I am just so happy to welcome you into our Modern Miracles community. We are in love with the teachings of A Course in Miracles. They are transformational, they are beautiful, they are challenging, and they are a pathway to peace and an experience of lasting joy. So, at Modern Miracles Academy, we have all kinds of courses and programs that help you as a Course in Miracles student deepen into the teachings and live an experience of the teachings. Okay, these teachings are meant to be lived. And so, even in our Miracle Monday classes, you are meant to be engaged and, in a way, participating, even though you're not necessarily asking any questions or sharing anything. You are actively listening, actively opening your heart, opening your mind, and welcoming in the insights, the clarity, the gifts, and the blessings that you are ready to receive. Okay. So I'm going to start with a prayer. We always start with a prayer, and then we will move into some of the teachings from the text. Okay, so if it's safe to do so, I invite you to rest your eyes gently closed. And we're going to take a nice deep inhale and a nice releasing exhale. Breathing deeply. Slowing down, giving ourselves permission to relax. We are unplugging from the noise of the world. We are unplugging from all of the tasks of our day. We are releasing any responsibilities we are carrying. And we are plugging into our powerful source of light and love within. Plug in vertically to the higher part of your mind. Plug into that source of light and let the light envelop you. Breathing, opening, calling upon our willingness to open our hearts and minds to the truth. The truth truly can set us free. Let's bring in joy. We are sprinkled and sparkling with joy. Let's bring in patience. Let's bring in the deepest trust that everything we need for our healing is given. Let's bring in our faith that our inner teachers, who we refer to as the Holy Spirit and Jesus in A Course in Miracles. So we invite our inner teachers, and we have such clear faith in them to guide our steps, to lead the way. We will step back and let them lead the way. Breathing and opening to receiving. Feeling deeply supported, anchored in our support system. All of our spiritual resources are available Turning and activating our inner listening, plugging in our inner ears, activating our inner vision, opening our inner eye, activating all of our intuitive senses, and our ability to identify the signs and symbols and synchronicities, the language of love. And activating our inner knowing that we may hold the knowledge of what is truly for us, the message, the word, the feeling, the vision, the insight, the miracle. Holding open to our inner wisdom and that inner knowing. Okay, so we are going to hold this prayer open and continuous. We are going to continue in this prayerful connection, even though we open our eyes. So gently open your eyes, but hold the connection by staying relaxed and open. Okay. There we go. Hmm. Well, welcome again, everyone. It's absolutely just a delight to join with you. And as I was saying before, if you come on the live calls, then you can stay for the question and answer at the end. So I recommend if you can ever come and join us live on one of our Zoom Mondays, 6 p.m. PST, that you do so. That would be wonderful to just come and have the experience of what it is like to join in the direct connection. And if you can only listen to the recordings, we are so happy that you are joining us here and now. And of course, that's perfect too. All right, so we are exploring the text of A Course in Miracles, and we are taught that actually a theoretical foundation, as the text sets out in its 31 chapters, is necessary to learning the course and integrating the teachings. It kind of gives that theoretical foundation that is really needed ultimately for the workbook lessons. So sometimes people start with the workbook lessons and they ask, do I have to read the text? And I say, yes, eventually you have to bring it all together. And we don't always do that in the same order, but yes, eventually you have to read the text. So going through the text in our community is actually a really, yeah, it's a really loving way to do so. Because if you have read the text on your own, you may find it difficult to understand. Many people feel like they are reading a different language. And it can just be helpful to say, you're not the only one that's struggling with the understanding. But here's what I want to say, that the concepts and the theory of the text, even that is meant to integrate into a lived experience, right? It's all meant to be lived. And so we are going from concept to theory to experience. That's the journey. And even on these calls, even when you're listening to my voice and listening to these recordings, I want you to have an experience of feeling your inner teachers in your mind. Holy Spirit and Jesus, we have invited them into our minds. Can you acknowledge that they are with you? They're in all of our minds. So we have the support we need. Can you open up your heart to receiving what resonates for you as you listen? I think that's really important. Not everything I say is going to land, but there are certain things that I am going to say that are going to land. They're going to spark for you. Maybe they spark a question. Maybe they spark something that is needing healing. Maybe they spark insight and clarity, right? That is for you on this journey. It does not matter if you have read the text or wherever you are in the text. We're going to meet right in this present moment and trust that whatever we need is perfectly given today. Okay? So you never have to worry about trying to keep pace or the order when we're going through on our Miracle Mondays. Eventually, you will read the text on your own if you are dedicated to the teachings, and these Miracle Mondays will be posted on the YouTube channel to watch later. So that's another resource for you as you're going through. Okay, so we have been exploring chapter 5 of the text, and today we are going to talk about section 5, the ego's use of guilt. Now, we have had some really beautiful sections that have been focused on the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit's function. In fact, the Holy Spirit has been called our guide to salvation. We have learned about healing and teaching. And the Holy Spirit has also been called the voice for God. So we have this beautiful inner teacher, the Holy Spirit. And Jesus, as the voice of the course, is teaching us, kind of teaching us how to invite the Holy Spirit into our awareness and to learn to trust this guide to salvation. So today we're going to pivot a little bit, trusting Jesus is the master teacher. He knows the direction he's taking us. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the ego and the ego's use of guilt. So he starts by saying, perhaps some of our concepts will become clearer and more personally meaningful if the ego's use of guilt is clarified. Now, even in this sentence, you can see that Jesus is trying to bridge that gap between theory and experience, because he's wanting all of these concepts and the meaning he's giving to them and the definitions of these things. He wants them to become clearer for us and more personally meaningful. Because if they're not personally meaningful, they really just stay over in the conceptual, and it really doesn't ever kind of land within. So, but he wants us to talk about the ego's use of guilt. So, and that's kind of a personal thing if we think about the ego's use of guilt, because the ego really personalizes the way that we experience guilt. So, for example, all the ways in which I feel guilty for the things that I do, the things that I say, the ways I feel wrong, the ways that I want to blame others and hopefully make them feel guilty. That's the point when I'm blaming you, that you'll feel the guilt, right? The way that we hold grievances. These are all the ways in which the ego utilizes guilt. What's interesting is that Jesus is going to teach us that the actual source of guilt is our belief that we have separated from God, is our belief that we have separated from love. We are over here in this personal experience of guilt playing out on the level of the world, in all the ways in which we feel guilty or want others to feel guilty. And actually, it's sourced from within us, from a belief within us that we have separated from God. Okay, so Jesus then tells us that the ego's purpose is fear. The ego's purpose is fear, and that fear is actually maintained by guilt. We hold the guilt in the mind by thinking that we're guilty and others are guilty, and then that maintains the fear in the mind. Now, again, that's not the real source of the guilt, that we believe we separated from God, but that's how we experience it personally. He tells us that the ego's logic is as impeccable as that of the Holy Spirit's, because the ego is its own thought system. It is a thought system of fear. It is a thought system of guilt. And it is impeccable because it is consistent. It consistently serves the purpose of fear. The Holy Spirit's thought system is also impeccable. It consistently serves the purpose of healing. Okay, they're both impeccable in their own way. That's because they are fully consistent with the purpose that they serve. So, Jesus tells us that what is truly blessed is incapable of giving rise to guilt. And what is truly blessed is what has been purified and reinterpreted by the Holy Spirit. Okay, so really the thoughts of God are truly blessed, or our disordered thoughts, our wrong-minded thoughts that have been lifted to the Holy Spirit, sorted out by the Holy Spirit, and purified by the Holy Spirit. Now, none of those thoughts can give rise to guilt. They must give rise to joy. They must give rise to joy because they are blessed by the Holy Spirit. He tells us that guilt is always disruptive. I like that word, disruptive. You can feel how disrupted we feel when we are carrying guilt, when we are feeling guilty. It's disruptive. Anything that engenders fear is divisive because it obeys the laws of division. If the ego is the symbol of the separation, it is also the symbol of guilt. Because the ego tells us that we've separated from God, and then we feel very guilty for that. And that guilt, again, it's the ego that is always associated with guilt because that guilt is always sourced from the belief that we believe we separated from God, and we feel terribly guilty for that. He says guilt is more than merely not of God. This is important. It's not just, oh, guilt is not of God, guilt is of the ego. It is the symbol of attack on God. So guilt is a symbol of attack on God. When we are associating ourselves with guilt, we believe that we have attacked God, that we've separated from God. And now, again, we feel terribly guilty. So it's not just merely not of God, it is the symbol of attack on God. Now, here's the funny thing. I'm going to lighten this up just for a moment, okay? Because I hear Jesus always has a good sense of humor. He says, this is a totally meaningless concept except to the ego, but do not underestimate the power of the ego's belief in it. This is the belief from which all guilt really stems. In truth, the Holy Spirit, the truth of things, knows we never separated from God. And so it's so silly to even talk about the idea that we've attacked God. We've never attacked God. That's impossible. We've never separated from God. But when we're associating with the ego as our teacher, we are believing we attacked God, and we are feeling the guilt of that belief. We're feeling the guilt of that belief. You see how we're kind of bringing it back metaphysically. We're going to also bring it more personally, but we kind of have to know the metaphysical underpinnings of what is going on with all the guilt that we experience and the fear that we experience. It seems like it's happening outside of us, but really, Jesus is pointing to what has happened in the mind, that we've believed a thought of separation, believed we were guilty for attacking God and separating from him, and now we are experiencing this incredible guilt. The guilt does not show up related to that. The guilt shows up in our life, in our experience. The ego is the part of the mind that believes in division. Of course, it is the belief in separation from God, so it believes in division. If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. Let's just take a moment with that. If you identify with the ego and you are aligned with its thought system, anytime we've chosen the ego as our teacher, you must perceive yourself as guilty. We must see ourselves as guilty. It goes together. It's interconnected. Whenever you respond to your ego You will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. Okay, let's take it from we believe we separated from God. We will now experience guilt because we're believing that thought. And now we are going to fear punishment because we think God is going to pursue us, that God is going to come after us and punish us for separating. That's what the ego has fed us in terms of the story. We've separated. We believe we've separated. We never really did in truth, but we believe we separated. We feel terribly guilty and we're terrified because God is coming after us. So this is a predicament, and we don't. It's kind of an interesting thing about how we navigate the ego thought system because we tolerate the ego thought system. We tolerate the ego thought system all the time in our minds. We are conditioned into the ego thought system, and then most of us don't know we have two thought systems in the mind. But when we discover that there are two thought systems in the mind, the ego and the Holy Spirit, and we open up to really what that means, we are brought into a deeper understanding of what we are really saying yes to when we side with the ego as our teacher. Okay, if you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. So that's one thing that we are saying yes to when we identify with the ego. And whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. So when we're responsive to the ego and we're entertaining its thoughts and we're siding with it, we will experience guilt and we will fear punishment. Jesus tells us that the ego is quite literally a fearful thought. It is literally a fearful thought. If we knew that the ego was a fearful thought, that we really understood that when we're thinking wrong-minded thoughts, that we are literally thinking fearfully, we would not want to keep those thoughts. We would not want to keep that thought system. It's in the underpinnings, it's beneath the surface, so we don't see it. But we will start to experience it more and more as we uncover and expose the ego and the fear and the guilt that it is. This is what happens through the forgiveness process in A Course in Miracles. He tells us, however ridiculous the idea of attacking God may be to you, or may be to the sane mind, never forget that the ego is not sane. It represents a delusional system and speaks for it. So the ego is insane. It represents a delusional system that it speaks for and believes it's true and real. So it's impeccable in the way it speaks for it. Listening to the ego's voice means that you believe it is possible to attack God and that a part of him has been torn away by you. Fear of retaliation from without follows because the severity of the guilt from us believing that we've separated from God and torn a part of him away, the severity of the guilt is so acute that it must be projected. This is why the threat appears outside of us, because we have projected the guilt. This is why we see a dangerous world. This is why we see attack. This is why we feel we have to defend ourselves. This is why we feel rejected. This is why we fear punishment. We see a fearful world, a dangerous world, because we have projected the guilt. The guilt is so acute that it has to be projected if we do not forgive it. We can't hold it. When we believe we've separated from God, we have to project the guilt. So it kind of goes like this. We believe we separated. We feel terribly guilty. We fear punishment. We project the guilt outside of ourselves, onto the world, onto bodies, onto all the other things. And then we see a fearful world. We see the world reflected back to us. And it's a world of chaos, and it's a world of guilt, and it's a world of division. if we go back to the laws of division. Are you guys following that? Can you kind of see the progression of how it's working? Now, remember, this is all happening on the level of our mind, and it's all been hidden from us. What we're experiencing here is like, what do you mean? I'm this person, and yeah, I have guilty feelings sometimes, and sometimes I feel afraid, but I'm good. I'm mostly doing okay. Well, as you go along on the path of A Course in Miracles and you start to really deal with your thinking, your wrong-minded thinking, and you start to forgive that thinking, the ability to discern between the wrong-minded thinking and the experience you have while you're thinking that way versus right-mindedness and how you feel in alignment with God will become very clear to you. And you will find it easier and easier to choose love over fear because you know the consequence that you experience when you stay in wrong-mindedness. You start to know you basically the ego gets exposed and you can feel more directly the guilt and the fear that it is. And that's why when the range is from suspicious to vicious with the ego, as you go further along, I would say that my experience of the ego at this point is it's just purely vicious because so much of it has been exposed that it can't hide its viciousness, its hatred, its fear, its darkness, it's fear, right? It's fear. So that's what it is, but it's played all these different parts through projection to keep our eyes looking outward and not looking at the thought system of the ego within. Sneaky, ingenious, but we're onto it. Okay, we are onto it with this course. Jesus tells us whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. It is your acceptance of it that makes it real. We know that the ego isn't real, but when we accept it and we believe in it, we experience it as our reality. He says, if you enthrone the ego in your mind, and I love that he's saying enthrone. I'm like, yes, we put the ego, when we choose the ego, we enthrone the ego, right? It gets to go up sit on the throne. It gets to be in charge, right? When you enthrone the ego in your mind, you are allowing it to enter, you're allowing it to enter, makes it your reality. We invite the ego in and it makes it our reality. What happens when we invite the ego in and we side with the ego? Right away, we are going to feel guilty. We are going to experience the fear of punishment. Those things go along automatically. He says, I said before that you must learn to think with God. To think with Him is to think like Him. This engenders joy, not guilt, because it is natural. Okay? Thinking with God is the most natural thing we can experience. Guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. Okay, I have a really cool point I want you to take in. Okay? He says, guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. Guilt is a sign that your thinking is wrong-minded. Guilt is a sign that you're thinking with the ego. Okay? That's a sign of that. When you feel it already says that you can't experience guilt with the Holy Spirit. It engenders joy. But if you're thinking with the ego, you will feel guilty. So to the ego, if you experience guilt, it tells you, yeah, that's because you're guilty. That's what the ego does. It says, the reason that you feel guilt is because you are guilty. That's what it says to us. But here's the point. When we experience guilt, all that it means is that we are thinking with the ego. It does not mean we're guilty. It does not mean anything it's saying. All it is a red flag for us that we are thinking with the wrong teacher. When we experience guilt, It is simply a red flag, a sign that we have chosen the ego as our teacher. Now the guilt becomes a sign for us. It alerts us that we need to choose again. That's it. And I'm going to go over this a little bit more, but this is very cool because guilt is very confusing when we think about it with the ego. The ego goes, you're guilty for this, and they're guilty for that, and you've done this, and you're wrong about that. And the Holy Spirit says, no, 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 no. If you feel guilt, you just have to choose me as your teacher again. You just chose the wrong teacher. That's all. Okay? So the ego cannot oppose the laws of God any more than you can. Okay? It can't change the laws of God. It can't oppose the laws of God, but it can interpret them according to what it wants, just as you can. This is why the question, what do you want, must be answered. What do you want? This has to be answered. Now, listen to this. You are answering it every minute and every second, and each moment of decision is a judgment that is anything but ineffectual. Every moment, every second, every minute, we are answering the question, what do I want? What do I want? A Course in Miracles is very clear and direct. There are only two things to choose from. What do I want? Do I want separation? Do I want unity? Do I want illusions? Or do I want the truth? Do I want fear? Or do I want love? Do I want guilt? Or do I want to know my innocence? Those are only two choices. Fear or love? The ego or the Holy Spirit? What do I desire? What do I want? We are answering that. And he's saying it is always impacting and affecting us, whatever the answer is that we choose. Whatever we choose, its effects will follow automatically until the decision is changed. That's very important. So as soon as I choose the ego, the effects of that ego thought system will follow until I change my mind and choose the Holy Spirit. It will fully choose the ego, 100% choose the ego, because you cannot be in two thought systems at the same time. You are in one 100%, or you are in the other completely. When I choose the ego, I get the effects of the ego until I choose my mind. And that goes the same when I choose the Holy Spirit. I experience the effects and impacts of the Holy Spirit's thought system until I change my mind. The Holy Spirit, like the ego, is a decision. Together, they constitute all the alternatives the mind can accept and obey. The Holy Spirit and the ego are the only choices open to you. That's it. One or the other. I love this. He says, God created one, and so you cannot eradicate it. Okay, God created the Holy Spirit's thought system. Those are the thoughts of God. We can't ruin it. We can't get rid of it. We can't eradicate it. We can't lose it. You made the other. We made the ego. We believed in this idea of separation. We made it up. And so you can eradicate it. You can. Only what God creates is irreversible and unchangeable. Just only what is true is irreversible and unchangeable. What you made can always be changed. This is good news, you guys. We need for what we made to be changed. Delusional ideas are not real thoughts, although you can believe in them. But you are wrong. I love that sentence. Anytime Jesus tells us we're wrong, just right across the board. By the way, you can believe in your delusional thoughts. They can seem real to you, but you're wrong. You're wrong about it all. You're wrong. You're wrong about every guilty thought you would hold. You're wrong about every wrong-minded thought you would hold. You're wrong about every separation thought you would hold. Okay? And that's good. We want to be wrong about all of it so that he can teach us what is truly right. He can bring us into right-mindedness and to our thoughts of God. Okay, so irrational thought is disordered thought. Interesting. Irrational thought is disordered thought. We're right back in talking about wrong-mindedness and the ego thought system. Every disordered thought is attended by guilt, and at its inception, at its inception, where it's born, is attended by guilt. Every disordered thought is attended by guilt. And maintained by guilt in its continuance. That's interesting, because what that means is that every wrong-minded thought is born in guilt and continued by guilt. The guilt is inherent in it. Guilt is inescapable by those who believe they order their own thoughts and must therefore obey their dictates. What does it mean to order our own thoughts and then obey those thoughts? So basically what we're saying is that when we're thinking wrong-mindedly, we're believing those thoughts, we also feel responsible for our thoughts. And that is why we spend time ranking, rating our thoughts, analyzing our thoughts, using our thoughts to solve problems, right? We sort our own thoughts. We make a hierarchy of our thoughts, the most important thoughts to the least important thoughts, the good thoughts from the bad thoughts. We assign meaning to the thoughts. That's all our way of sorting our own thoughts. And when we do that, we make them serious, we make them real, and we believe that we have to obey their dictates because we believe in them. We are caught in disordered thinking. So actually, when we sort our thoughts, this makes us feel responsible for the errors, right? That the errors that we're thinking about, the problems that we have, the issues, the challenges, the guilt that we hold, it makes us feel totally responsible for it all. Again, those thoughts, we're believing it. And now we feel responsible. Now, this is again like one of those like fine points that we have to lean in on. He's telling us that we are not responsible for the errors in our mind, because what we are responsible for, okay? He says the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. And then he says, and I assure you that it is. Then the responsibility for what is atoned for cannot, okay, let me read that again. That's a little, if the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself, and I assure you that it is, then the responsibility for what is atoned for cannot be yours. You cannot be responsible for what you are atoning for, all the thoughts, all the disordered thoughts, and all the errors that come with them, and also hold the responsibility of accepting the correction and the atonement for yourself. Those are two different responsibilities and two different thought systems. He says the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to simply accept the atonement for yourself, meaning that you are going to give all your guilty, disordered thinking to the Holy Spirit and ask for a reinterpretation. Ask for correction of your thinking. You're going to choose the Holy Spirit instead of the ego. And when you choose the Holy Spirit, it will start to lay out, everything will lay out from that right-minded thinking and healing. When you are caught in the ego, you feel responsible for your thoughts and your disordered thoughts. You can't hold those two responsibilities. And Jesus tells us you only have one responsibility. You are not responsible for all the errors on the surface of the world. All the errors, all the problems, all the issues, all the things we're trying to fix and solve. We get caught there believing in all of it, and all of it is just a sign and symbol that we've chosen the wrong teacher. Remember, all we need to do now is use guilt as an indicator that we need to choose the Holy Spirit and ask for help in reinterpretation. We don't need to spend any more time delaying in ordering our thoughts. We are off the hook with that. Jesus does everything in this course to start to pull us away from the distraction of our thinking, pull us away from the value that we've placed on that level of thinking. He says, it's meaningless. Those thoughts aren't true. They're delusional. They're guilt, they're fear, they're fearful thoughts. You do not want them. You just want to choose the right-minded teacher that can undo them on your behalf. That is choosing the atonement. He tells us you would be responsible for the effects of all your wrong-minded thinking if it could not be undone. If it was real and it was real, and it couldn't be undone, we would be responsible for that. The fact of the matter is that all wrong-minded thinking is illusionary, and it can all be undone. And that's why we're not responsible for it. It never was real to begin with. It was rooted in a faulty belief that has no foundation at all. We've never separated from our source. We've never done anything to our loving, the most loving, perfect source of creation. God is happy and perfect, and we are with him, and we have fallen asleep, and we are deluded in this nightmare of separation, and we are on our way out to that awareness that the separation never happened, and we are free. But we have to move through and give up the disordered thinking to the Holy Spirit so that he can sort it out. That's his job in the atonement, is to sort out the true from the false and return to us what is beautiful, what is blessed, what is truly blessed is what he returns to us. Is impossible. It cannot give rise to guilt. It must give rise to joy. Okay? Yeah, and then he tells us the purpose of the atonement is to save the past in purified form only. And there's a beautiful line he said last time in the last section where he said, all your past is gone except all your past is gone except its beauty. Okay, so just a little section left of section 5, the ego's use of guilt. Jesus tells us the continuing decision to remain separated is the only possible reason for continuing guilt feelings. It's the only reason for continuing guilt feelings is to actually the decision to remain separated. Any decision of the mind will affect both behavior and experience. What you want, you expect. So what he's saying is, and this is kind of being repeated, he's saying when you choose a thought system, when you choose the thought system of the Holy Spirit, then what follows is the impact of both your behavior and your experience, because you're now literally aligned with a thought system of love and healing, and now your behavior and experience are coming from that thought system versus your perceptions that come and your behavior and your experience that comes from when you're following the ego. And so in this way, Jesus actually says, your mind does make your future, right? Because whatever we're deciding on is then being, it says, until you change your mind again, that's going to play out as you move along. He says, and it will turn it back to full creation at any minute if it accepts the atonement first. Having given up its disordered thought, the proper ordering of thought becomes quite apparent. So we don't have to sort the ego out. We do not have to sort out our disordered thinking. In fact, that's what keeps us trapped in the guilt. We give up the disordered thinking. We lift those thoughts to the Holy Spirit, to the light in our mind. We accept the atonement. We say, show me another way to see that. We accept his interpretation. And we get to experience the natural order of our mind, that we get to experience what it is to be in alignment with God's will. We get to experience a peaceful, tranquil mind, which Jesus says a tranquil mind is not a little gift, right? It is enormous. And so let us remember, and this was actually in a paragraph earlier, and it says this, let us remember this, that the guiltless mind cannot suffer. The guiltless mind cannot suffer. And I'm going to end with this as well, that guilt, of course, is not the truth. But because we experience it, we are now using it as a sign to choose once again, right? We're using it as that beautiful sign, alert, that red flag that we are caught in guilt thinking, we are caught in the ego thought system, and that we have the power, the freedom to choose the Holy Spirit and to choose love instead. So I believe this is a very powerful section. And one of the things I always recommend after we go through a section is for you to take some time to go and read this section on your own. Read it slowly and prayerfully. Join with the Holy Spirit. Join with Jesus as you read it. And I think it will land more deeply in your heart and mind now that we've kind of gone through and highlighted certain parts of it. That is chapter 5 of the Course in Miracles text, the ego's use of guilt. That's section 5, the ego's use of guilt. Okay, so thank you so much for your presence and that depth of listening. And we're just so happy to have you as part of our community. If you are interested in going deeper with the curriculum of A Course in Miracles, Modern Miracles Academy, we have so many courses and supports in place for you. You can visit our website at www.modernmiracles.com and come join me for a discovery session. I'd love to connect and meet you and hear about your spiritual path. So have a beautiful, beautiful, blessed day.